Okay, so we're going to continue on with part 2 of our little Project 1 tutorial. First thing I want you to do is drag in a little ground plane so we have some place to stand. So go into the environment folder under content environment. That's the ENV one that I had you save in. And go to assets, go to terrain, and you'll see a little terrain model in here. When you hover over it, it says terrain static mesh. And that is just a piece of mesh that we can drag into our scene, and it will be static, meaning it will not move. So drag it in, and then let's set this to 0, 0, 0. And we have a ground plane. Now, this is kind of large for what I want to do. You can leave it this large, but I think I'm going to scale mine down to half that size, because there's really no need to cover all that ground. And so now we have a ground plane. And theoretically, we can stand on it and move around. However, if I hit play, let's see my headset. You'll notice it doesn't do anything. I forgot an important step. So under play, what we need to do is set it, instead of the viewport, set it to VR preview. And now, theoretically, I should be able to view it in my headset. So here I am, and you'll notice a few things. You can see what I see. One, we're floating up in the sky, and two, our teleport doesn't work. That's because we're missing a couple of things. So let's escape out of here. And the first thing we want to do is prevent ourselves from spawning up in the air. And to do that, what we need is a player start. So we'll go up to basic, go to player start, and we'll just drag that in. And we'll set that to 0, 0, 0. And that tells the game where to put the camera when it starts. So let's go ahead and hit play, see if that fixed that. Okay, so now we're on the ground. We've spawned where my player start is, but our teleport doesn't work. What are we missing? Well, a couple of things. We have our nav mesh bounds, which our player controller relies upon, but it also relies upon the collision mesh of the terrain, and this terrain has no collision mesh, so we're going to fix that. So on this terrain static mesh here in our Explorer, let's double click on that. Now we are in a separate window. This is our sort of model editor window where we can view static meshes and make changes to it. We can swap out materials, change import settings, and all kinds of things. What we're going to do here is create collision mesh for it. And a collision mesh is a separate, usually lower res mesh that handles all the physics interactions. And the reason for that is, most visual mesh is way higher resolution than it needs to be, and the physics calculations are expensive calculations. So what you want is the lowest resolution mesh that will work to make those physics calculations. So oftentimes what happens is you have a separate mesh that's invisible called a collision mesh, and that's what the game uses to calculate, physics interactions. So we're in our little window here, we're going to go up to collision, and then we're going to go to add box simplified collision. That's kind of the simplest collision. And that added a collision box to our mesh. It'll take a little while to scroll out to see it. You just kind of barely see that green in there. So now we have a collision mesh, so let's hit save. Exit out of here. And we should be able to use our teleport. But you'll notice one other thing. the area that we can use our teleport in is going to be teeny tiny. It won't extend out more than our nav mesh bound. So what the nav mesh does, so this teleport system relies on something called nav mesh, which is like another mesh that systems like AIs use to navigate around. Like if you had, for example, an AI enemy like character, it would use this mesh as a guide to navigate your environment. Well, the VR pawn and the teleport in particular uses that nav mesh. So first let's visualize what our nav mesh is doing. So if we go up here in our viewport, hit show, and then go down to navigation. Click on that, you'll see our little green mesh here. This is the extent of the navigation mesh. Okay, so what we want to do is expand the size of this navigation mesh. So what I'm going to start with is just scaling up by 20 in the X and Y, and then let's do 10 in the Z. Yeah, I think that's probably big enough for now. If you find that you are unable to navigate towards the edges and you want to, like if you're creating a scene and you've got stuff out there, go ahead and expand the nav mesh, but I'm just going to leave mine for here at this. So from here, let's just go ahead, now that we've got a nav mesh that we like, let's go ahead and hide that. We don't really need to see that. And we are going to start populating the level. In order to do that, let's go to the env folder, expand it, and see that there's a bunch of folders, kind of somewhat intuitively named, that have a bunch of assets to populate.